My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn, and with me is Tanya Finchum. We're with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at the OSU Library. Today is Monday, June 13th, 2011, and we're in Hugo, Oklahoma, interviewing Mary Rawls. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. You break the monotony for me.
Well, we'd like to begin by learning a little bit about where you were born and where you grew up.
I was born in San Francisco, California, at St. Mary's Hospital. The time that I was born there, they called it the Spawn Hospital. And later on, they became St. Mary's. But the day that I was born, my mother said, and this is a joke, that there was something like 30 babies born the same day. And right after that, the fleet left town. That's what she told me.
And what year was that?
1927.
Okay. That's probably the only date I'll ask you today. I'm just kidding.
I'll do the best I can with the dates. November 11th, 1927.
Well, tell me a little bit about your mom and your dad.
Well, my mother was a juggler. She wasn't a juggler when Dad married her. She was a very shy telephone operator that he met when he was trying to make a telephone, because she had one of those switchboard operator things. And he met her, and of course, I guess he was a flirt or something, because they got to talking, and then they started dating, and pretty soon she was married. And she had me.
And what city did he meet her in?
I can't recall the city, but it was in California.
Okay.
Oh, God. And what did he do?
Hmm?
And what did your father do?
He was a jack of all trades, really, because if you remember, 2 years or so after I was born, 1929 was a really bad year. Nobody had any work. He was a sign painter. He could do most anything with his hands, but he moved to Texas, and he had a little sign shop there. And then when the Depression came on and the banks went south, he lost everything, because he had a mortgage on his shop and everything, and they just hit the road. And my mother told me that when we were crossing the line from California heading east, the dust was so bad that she had to keep wetting handkerchiefs and put them over my face so that I could breathe. But I guess I was about 2 years old when he finally had his sign shop. And he was doing real good until the crash came. And then it was a case of just moving around and doing sign jobs here. He used to paint a whole sign, a cafe sign, dinner served here, etc., on the front window of a restaurant, and he would do that for a quarter, because that's all he could get out of it. Well, pretty soon along came Corky, my brother, and then along came Johnny, and we were still at it, going down the road, sign painting, whatever could be done. And pretty soon he started training us to do acts. I know when I was 6 years old, he taught me how to do what they call a carrying perch. He has a belt that he wears, and then there's a pole that goes up about 20 feet, and I was taught to climb that and perform tricks on it, hand tricks and one-hand flanges and stuff like that. When we did that, the boys were still little, and so he hadn't trained them to anything. He did teach my mother to juggle, and she had an awful time with that, because when we did, there were a few theaters still that had vaudeville down in the South, and they were just little humpy-dumpy theaters. You don't get much money, but you did get a salary. And so he was teaching her to juggle. Well, she didn't have any trouble. She finally learned to juggle and was a good juggler. But she hated wearing those short costumes. I'm not going out there. I mean, the costumes come down to here in those days. So I'm not going out there like that. I can't go out there like that. But she did. And when the vaudeville business just died out, which didn't take long, we started busking. And busking is, my dad would drive into a town in our house car. It was a homemade, home-built house car. And he'd go see the mayor and get permission to do a little show on the street. So he would pick out a place where there was room enough to do it, and we would do a show. I mean, he'd do his chair balancing act, Mom would do her juggling act, and I would do the climb up and up on the perch pole. Well, the only thing the boys could do was a boxing act. So they did a boxing act, and then they would take on. Corky was the oldest. Johnny was not really that big then. He was 3-4 years old, and so he would take on a comer from town. Well, Corky was pretty good at defending himself, but some of those town kids were pretty tough. I mean, he took a few bops in the nose. But I think the most memorable thing that I can recall from the busking days, excuse me, we did a performance and we passed the hat. You know, you do a trick and you pass the hat. Excuse me. And after the show was over and we were folding up our stuff, there was an old man come up to my dad. And my dad and I were just like this. And he called my dad aside and he said, I wanted to tell you, mister, that how much we appreciate you coming here and putting on this show. My kids haven't been able to go to a movie. We haven't had any money. We're broke as we can be. But it was just so nice to have a show the kids could see and enjoy. And I wanted you to know how much we appreciate it. I said, I didn't have any money to put in your hat, but I wanted you to know we appreciated it. And that has stayed with me all my life. It's just made me feel like we were doing something worthwhile anyway. And from that we graduated to, we didn't go for circuses for a long time. And finally I guess by this time I was about 15. My dad was still painting signs all the way, and came a few times when he couldn't get a sign job, and he was making plans to break into a grocery store to get food. And before he did that, he got a window job for 50 cents. And that, of course, in 50 cents, you could buy a quart of milk, you could buy a pound of bologna, you could buy a loaf of bread and have money left over. So that took us for a long time. And then we joined this show out in Kansas, and I cannot recall the title of it. The man that owned it was a cowboy, a trick rider, and it was a great little show to be with, very family-oriented. And it had a sideshow, and I don't know if you've seen the movie Water for Elephants or read the book. It comes on pretty strong on the worst parts of circus. But in the little shows in those day and age, they maybe have what they call a 3-card Monte game in the sideshow. The sideshow, they'd have it, and then this guy would play this 3-card Monte, which is a gambling game, and usually cricket. And then some shows would have what they call, can't think what they call it, but they'd run everybody out, all the women and children, and then they would have a coochie dancer, and just the guys could come in and see that, and that cost them an extra dime. So that's the way it was then. But on this show we were out there, it was all very family. There's a caste system on a circus. You've got the performers, and they all stay in the backyard. They have their trailers or their house cars or so forth. And then you have got the midway people that run the concessions, the cotton candy stand, the novelty stand, and so forth. And then you have the working men. And if you have a sideshow, you have got the sideshow people. And these are groups that don't really mingle all that much. I mean, the backyard people stay to the backyard, the midway people stay to the midway, and the sideshow people stay to themselves. Not in a mean way. That's just that's what you do. And that a lot of that, in like you take the 3-card Monte, or have you ever seen a movie where they have the little shells with they have that kind of stuff too, and that goes on. But it wasn't as bad as what that. I started to read that book, Water for Elephants, and I got through the first couple of chapters, and I thought they're just picking the worst parts of it. They're not telling the true story at all. It's not the way it is. So I just didn't finish the rest of the book. But I've heard that they've made a movie out of it since, and it's I haven't seen that one either. But they did. I guess everybody's seen The Greatest Show on Earth on TV. Yeah, whoa. Whenever they make a circus movie, they just can't get it right. And they don't tell the true story about it all. It's so much more wonderful than what they put it, but they've got to glamorize. There's one scene in there where this girl is doing her act in the show, and the boss canvasman, for Pete's sake, walks into the center ring and pulls her off the ring and says she can't do it. That's unheard of. Why, he'd have been fired and kicked off the lot. But you just don't do things like that. So that kind of puts the kibosh on the reality of any movie about circuses, because naturally they pick out the worst parts to show anyway, and they don't show the family atmosphere in the back and how we all stick together and help each other. I mean, it's the whole backyard is one family, and it's the same with the sideshow and so forth. But pretty soon sideshows kind of died, and they became animal exhibits. Carson Barnes opened over here this spring in Paris, and they had a tremendous crowd. I mean, the tent was so full that they had people sitting on the ground. And it was a good show. They put on a real good show. But the prices of things have gone up so much. I mean, I used to run a novelty stand when I got a little bit too far gone to do the aerial stuff and so on, and I run a novelty stand. Well, I was shocked because I'm not one to go out and visit circuses now, because it's the life that I had, the life that I enjoyed, but it's changed so much. But when I found out that you had to pay $3.50 for a hot dog, and those plastic swords that they sell, the $12 for those, I said, that is for the birds. And I'm talking. Anybody want to ask a question?
Sure. Going back to Kansas when your family joined the circus,
Mm-hmm.
how long were you there?
We were there for just one season, and then we came to Hugo in the mid-40s, early 40s, and we joined the Colin Walters, Herb Walters, and his family lived here, and they used to have a house out here, and we were with him for 2 or 3 years. In fact, we almost got fired the first day we showed up because my brother Johnny had been in the service. He was a Green Beret, and we had a homemade trampoline, and it didn't work. The first show we did on Herb's show, the trampoline broke down, and Johnny had to get out there and get a sledgehammer and knock the thing back together and then go on with the act, and we almost got fired. We really almost got fired. Herb came across the lot headed towards Harry's trailer, and Harry said, uh-oh, here it comes. I know it's coming. So Harry ran out right away and met with the boss and talked him out of firing. He says, give us a week. Just give us a week. Because I had just had a baby, and I tried to go do my swinging ladder, and it was a skinny ladder. And I tried to go through to come out on the other side and do my thing, and I couldn't get through. I had to back up and go around. I was still too big in the belly. And so I can see how Herb felt when he came. I said, good Lord, they're going to kill my show. But he finally talked Herb out of it, and so we made the season with him. And we made 2 or 3 seasons with Herb. They were nice folks, too. His wife was kind of uppity at times, but she was a good soul, too. So we were there for a long time, and we spent time on the Carson and Barnes Circus. We were with the King Show. We were with Kelly Miller for years, over here across the street. And that was David's show. And we were down in Florida at the time David was taking out his show. Well, David had it out for 1 year, and he and his first wife really struggled and worked hard just to get that show going. But he made a success of it, and he was 20 years on the road with Kelly Miller and never had a losing season. He made money each season, and a good, clean, honest show. And David would gather everybody in the big top on opening day. We opened out here at the fairgrounds, and he would line everybody up, working men, sideshow people, everybody on the bleachers, and he'd give a speech. And he said, "Now this is the rule. I don't want to see the sign of one beer can on the midway. I don't want to see you getting rough or snarly with any of the people." And a regular thing like that. And he would introduce each group of people. We had the waterman, we had the man that handled the gas truck, we had the big top crew, we had the boss canvassman, and he would introduce each one for their particular field in there. And he ran a good, successful show for 20 years without losing a dime and not cheating the public either. So,
And we should say David's your son.
yes, he's my oldest son. That's him up there on the far left corner.
Can we back up just a bit too, and how your father learned to juggle himself in order to teach you?
My father couldn't juggle, but he taught my mother to do it anyhow. And I can still see her. We had in the back of our house car, there was a big double bed where they slept, and I won't stand up, but she stand in front of that bed, so the whole bed there, and she started tossing these balls. And she said, "I can't do this. I can't do this." Yes, you can. Just do it this way. Do it this way. And he's seen so many jugglers. They juggle the balls, and they juggle the hoops, and they juggle the, what do you call them? They look like the 10 pins in a bowling alley. I can't think of them. Just clubs is what I'll call them. And so she finally got to where she was a pretty good juggler. And she would line up a bunch of cigar boxes that had been painted and sequined and mid-stop. And she would stack them up about 12 high and then turn one sideways like this and push them up and knock one out, push them up and knock one out until she got to the last one. And that was the end of her act. And she was still wearing short wardrobe. That was the funniest part, because you'd have thought he asked her to step out in front of the highway, run the program and stark naked. But, I mean, they come down in the middle of your thigh. She was quite well covered. We did a lot of until vaudeville came out. After vaudeville came out, we did a lot of club dates in the wintertime. The Eagles Club would have a big dinner or something, and they wanted something to entertain the act. Well, we got a lot of those, Eagles and Lions and so forth. And we'd give maybe a 15 or 20 minute program on their dance floor. And I can remember one time, my tight wire act, they had a low ceiling, lower than this in this club. And so Dad had to fix me up a pair of standards with the tight wire on them that was no more than this high from the floor. And I was walking wire. Well, I was used to walking wire up here. And I took a misstep on the thing, and I fell and threw my arm out of whack, and I was out of work for a couple of weeks. And finally I told Dad, I said, I can't work on that little bitty wire. But we finished. My brother and I did wire act together, my brother Johnny. Corky was a juggler, and he didn't like getting up out of the air, up in the air. And another thing that happened to me on Herb's show, I was doing swinging ladder, and I had made the jump up, but I had just gotten through with the kids in the trailer, and I hadn't got my costume completely fixed up, and my bra came loose at the top, and I'm sitting there like this, and Jimmy was the prop man, and he was swinging my ladder. I said, "Jimmy, get me a pin, get me a pin." So I said, "Swing me and get me a pin." So he swung me, and I sat there, gracefully swinging back and forth while he ran and got me a safety pin to pin my bra together so I could finish the act. There's all kinds of things that happen like that sometimes.
How did you learn that particular act?
My dad taught me. He had, my first wire rigging was made out of 2x4s. And it came up and it had a set. And my mother tried to walk the wire with it, but poor mom, she was terrified of heights, and she was never any good on the wire. And she used a pole, and I always used an umbrella. Well, we were doing the pole act, and I was supposed to be riding on her shoulders across the wire. Well, we did that a couple of times, but she was just always so nervous and so afraid. You get her 2 feet off the ground, and she's scared to death. Well, we took a fall, and that was the end of Mom's work on us. So that's it. I'm not going to do it anymore. So it became my job. So I learned to walk the wire, and at first was in short costumes, and then later on I started out in an evening gown and made my style out and pulled up on the wire, and I waltzed across the wire, and then I waltzed back again, and then I took my gowns were made so all I had to do was go zip and they would fall off. And then I was in short costumes, and I did the rest of the act in the short costume. The splits and the cakewalk, and then I'd sit at a table and balance on the chair, and somebody would hand up a tray to me, and I'd take a drink of Coca-Cola or something on the wire. And we did that a lot in the wintertime. We had dates with Jimmy Cole up in the East, and a lot of his were school dates. They would get the auditorium and put on a school and a whole show. And there was a lot of fine people on that too, who's half of them I can't remember their names, but they were great people to work with. And we spent the whole winter like that, which was a little rough for us because we were not used to that snow and ice up there in that part of the country. And I do go on and on. How about a question?
What did you do about schooling, though? Were you still in high school or school age at that time?
I have never gone to a public school. My father, when we were small, we had this big old house car, homemade, and we had a dinette in the front of it, just over the motor. And Dad would set us down there, and he taught us school. He taught us to read and to write and to do arithmetic and geography. And a lot of times we'd go to a school, and they would have discontinued or unused school books, and they would let us have them for free. And Dad would just teach us there at the table. We went to school right there in the house car. And we just picked up a lot on the way. And I feel embarrassed sometimes to say it, but I've never spent a day in a schoolhouse. Whatever knowledge I have, I've gained on my own afterwards. But I have always been a voracious reader. By the time I was 5 years old, I started reading little books. I mean, you probably don't remember because you're too young, but they called little big books. And they were about that thick, but they were only about that big. And I used to get those all the time and read them. And then my reading progressed and progressed and progressed until I read everything I could get my hands on. I can recall a scene in my trailer, and Mom was having me do the dishes, and I was washing the dishes, and I got a book in one hand, and I'm washing the dish like this and reading the book. And this Mom says, "Would you please put that book down and get the dishes done?" And it's always, at night, my bunk, we had bunk beds for my 2 brothers and myself, and I had the top bunk because I was the oldest. And I would read at night, and she said, "Put out that light." Okay. So then I had a flashlight, and I pulled the covers over my head, and I read the book underneath the covers. So I got in trouble for that too.
Did your father continue side jobs in addition to circus work?
No, once we began to get a salary, he didn't have to do that anymore. Now, he did do circus painting on the shows themselves, but he didn't go travel, because we traveled from town to town to do the paint jobs. And I remember one time, what Sam Hill's show were we on? Some show down in Texas went broke. And we were trying to get our way home because we didn't get our salary. And Dad was painting our way home back to Max Creek. We used to live in Max Creek. We finally got to the point where we bought a home in, well, it wasn't actually in Max Creek, Missouri. It was between 2, Camdenton and Max Creek. And that's so funny. Dad bought that house from a picture he saw in the real estate office, which was in Buffalo. And when we got there, it didn't look anything like the picture. I mean, anything. There was no driveway up to the thing. And of course, Missouri then was a lot more wooded area, especially up there. What's the word? I can't remember the word. Anyway, we sat in this on the side of the road, and my mom was dead set against it. And she had Corky on her side. He was dead set against it. And Dad and I both wanted to stay there and make something out of this deriptable house. And Johnny was the key one. And we finally swung Johnny our way. So, because when we did things like that, it was with a vote among the family. And Johnny hung out, and finally we talked him into our side. So Dad got out with a shovel and built a driveway, so we pull our house car up there and start working on this house. And oh man, what a mess that was! Because whoever had built the house built the floor out of unseasoned oak wood, and it was a mess. When they began to season, the wood would at the tips curl up like this, and you should try sweeping a floor like that. I mean, it was a living mess. And there was my father was great for regressing because we had a big old wood stove, the cook stove, and Mama had always had a gasoline stove in the house car. And she would kick that thing and cuss at it and everything else. She couldn't get a fire going in it. And I never had any problem getting a fire going in it, so she always called me and said, "Start this stupid thing." And it's one of those kind, they had the heating thing up top where if you baked a pie or something, you could put it up there and keep it hot and so on. And she cussed that thing out so many times, I can't believe it. But we lived there a couple of years, and then we went out and we used to play county fairs. County fairs then were so different than they are now. I'm so disappointed in what they have here. Because they would have an ice carnival, but they always had a racetrack. It was either horses or sulky races or one or the other. And they'd have a platform on the infield at the track and then the grandstand in front. And we did a lot of fair dates that way too. And of course, we got out in west, especially in Kansas, I'd have the devil of a time because I had my umbrella, to balance with, and here comes that Kansas wind and just about blows you clear off of the thing. One time it blew the umbrella out of my hand and landed way up in the middle of the infield, and fortunately I had a spare, so they gave me a spare. But
you mentioned the one circus where your dad, the one in Texas that went bankrupt, and your dad had to pay his way back.
Mm-hmm.
In the early days, how was pay negotiated? Was it like a family rate or?
Well, Dad handled all the money. We got paid a family rate.
Okay.
It depended, on what you did and what you could put in the program. And if you were getting $50 or $100 a week or something like that. You didn't. Of course, you didn't have a lot of the taxes and takeout money. You got the waterman always filled your water tank for you, and the gasoline was always provided for you on the show. And you also had a cookhouse where everybody ate in the cookhouse. That's another thing. When we came on to OOHRP show, we had all these kids, of course, and we were not allowed. The kids were not allowed to eat in the cookhouse. Too many people. We finally got that rule turned down, and I got a picture of my son Michael, the youngest one up there, and he's standing up on the benches like in a picnic yard, and he's eating mashed potatoes, and you can see the mashed potatoes running all down his tummy and everything. I've got that picture someplace. I wish I could find it real quick.
Well, tell us how you met your husband.
Well, we were on a show in Florida. This is the one that went broke. And we had traveled down there, and the show was opening, and we were hired for it, and we spent the season on it. But when we first got there, funny, they must have been having rough times even before we got there because Mom and I were headed for the cookhouse, and they were having wieners and sauerkraut. And I said, "Oh, look, Mom, they're having wieners and sauerkraut." Mama loved wieners and sauerkraut. And other people in the cooktop, they looked at us like we were nuts because they'd been eating wieners and sauerkraut for a week because that's all the cookhouse could afford. So we didn't get much of a reputation that way. And Harry was on that show, and we made the season, and he took a liking to me. Of course, by this time I was engaged to that fellow up in Nebraska. He owned 1,000 acres of land all his own, besides what his dad owned, and I was getting ready to, I was considering the fact of marrying him. We were sort of engaged, but he was a strict towner. He would never have been able to live our life, and I don't think I'd have been able to live his either. Anyway, I met Harry, and he asked me to go up to the drugstore and have a Coca-Cola with him, and from there on, he got real acquainted with my folks, and they liked him quite a bit. And I said, well, okay. But I had a picture of Gerald, this Nebraska farmer, sitting on the dresser right by the door. Well, whenever Harry would come and visit us, and he spent a lot of time visiting my folks, he was trying to oil them up, I think. But he turned that picture around, make it face the wall, and I would turn it back again. And there was a time Dad said, why don't you guys go over to, we were on a lot that had an ice cream parlor on one side. Why don't you go over and get some ice cream, and we'll all have some ice cream together. So fine. Well, we went over, and I got the ice cream, and I was going to pay for it. And Harry, Gabe he was at that time, was insisting on paying. I said, no you don't, I can pay my own way. And we had a big row. I insisted on paying for my own ice cream. I don't need anybody to buy me ice cream. And he come in. He didn't talk to me for about 2 days, and finally he comes stomping over to the trailer, and I mean stomping. And he said, I'm going for a Coke. You want to go? And then we started dating. Well, we just started, being friends on the show. And then when we got into winter quarters, which is in Sebring, Florida, why, he asked me for a date, and it was Christmas time. And so we went to midnight mass together, and because I'm a Catholic, and he was a Catholic. And we went from there, and he took me for breakfast. We used to do a lot of walking around town, but a real sad thing happened on that show while we were in that winter quarters. Some of the advance agents and bill posters were not happy with the fact that the show couldn't pay off, because everybody's sitting there, and it was an old fairgrounds, and we were sitting in there on our trailers and so forth, and it was kind of a nice time in a way, but the show was broke, and they didn't get their pay, and they had, they had 3 rings of Liberty horses. That's when all the horses trot around the ring, and do different things. And those guys poisoned the horses. It was such a sad thing. I've got pictures of that someplace too, where the horses are dying and so on. And it was so sad. And of course, Harry and he had a buddy, Leon Snyder, who stayed with. And so we kind of palled around together through the winter quarters and so on. And I'll never forget. Now this is kind of personal. I don't know if you'll get a kick out of it or not, but I did, because we didn't hardly even hold hands. We were just friendly buddies. And finally he came, brought me home after one walk around town that we'd done, and he'd taken me to breakfast and so on. And then we got to the step by my trailer, and he says, can I kiss you goodnight? And I said, well, yeah. Well, he kissed me like that and quit. I said, you call that a kiss? And I dragged around behind the trailer, and I gave him a whopper. And he ran all the way home. He was so shy. But we finally got together, and he asked my dad he did a whip cracking act where he cuts off the papers and put it in somebody's hand, and he asked my dad if I could work in his act, if I could hold the papers for him in the whip act. And he said, well, if you promise not to hit her. So I worked the papers in his whip act. And then the show went broke. And so we left there, and we went up east with, I just said his name a minute ago, anyhow, it was the high school show in the auditorium, and Jimmy Cole, he booked those. So we spent a season up there, and of course I was writing back to Harry all the time, and he was still Gabe at that time, and he was writing to me all the time, and we finally finished the season up there, and we went back to Max Creek. And so Harry was getting ready to come, and so he hopped the bus to come up to Max Creek. He was going to join the family. And the bus only went so far, so he had to get up with his suitcase in hand, and he was walking. And of course, Dad and I were supposed to meet him at the bus stop. Well, we got halfway there, and here comes Gabe walking down the street carrying his suitcase. We picked him up, and he stayed with the family. And Dad put him to work on the farm, and Harry and Gabe didn't like that much. Anyhow, we finally got engaged, and we got married at a little church in what's the name of that town? Anyhow, it was about 30 miles from where we were living, and we got married there. Dad was not happy, even not happy about it at all. I was the only girl in the act. I mean, my mom, but she was with my mom, and I was the girl in the act, and he was not happy about losing me. I said, "You're not going to lose me. I'll still be here." And he said, "Yeah, but you're going to be married." I said, "Well, didn't you get married?" Anyhow, we got married in that little church. And like I say, Dad was moping and grumbling all the way along the line. And my brothers tried to tie some tin cans and old shoes on the back of the car. And Dad came out and saw that when we got through with the service in the church. And he said, "Get that stuff junk off of the car. Get that off of the car." Oh, he was just upset. But he built us a trailer. He took an old... I know you have no idea what Celotex is, but it was a siding that they used to use years ago. And it was made out of just like pressed sawdust. And then it had a gritty siding on the outside. Dad took the frame of a Model A and took everything off of it except the frame and the cab. And he built us a house car on that. A mean sucker. He built 2 single beds, one on each side. And Harry and I lived in that throughout the summer fair season that we were going on. I don't know, there's just so many things that strike your head and come back to you all the time. And you have some ups and some downs and so forth. But
And when did you get married? What year?
wait a minute, I'll go get my marriage license, see if I can remember.
That's okay.
We were married for 60 years, and he passed away just 4 years ago. Well, it's not quite 4, it's almost 4. And we retired from the business under Harry's insistence. We had a nice little house out in Southern States that's just south of town out here out in the country. And we lived there for 12, 13 years. And Harry took sick. He was sick for 2 years. He got cancer, several operations and so forth, but didn't help much. And he passed away. And of course, there weren't too many other people. There was a few houses out there, but there was a lady down at the end of our street who lived by herself. And her son was in another town working, and nobody saw her for a couple of days. And we couldn't figure out why, She was right there on the corner. You had to come down to get to my house. Make a long story short, she had died. And all of her windows and doors were locked, which old ladies do. They lock everything when they go to bed. And she just laid there until I got to asking the people across the street from her, and they got interested, and they had her son's phone number. So they called him and they found her and took her out of there. Well, that kind of scared Dad and I both because Midge, she could be a pain. Anyway, we decided that we'd move into town, and David had this house that he had owned, and it's an old house. It's been here for probably from statehood. And David had this whole thing remodeled and prepared for us. And then before Dad could move in, he passed away. So I moved in by myself, which was very comforting to have my oldest son right next door to me. And so I've been living here for 3.5 years. And David's a good boy. He takes care of his mama. He still calls me Mama. I mean, he's 63 years old. He calls me Mama.
Well, would you continue to develop acts with your husband after you got married?
Oh yeah, we still did the Western act. He did his whip cracking act and his rope spinning and so forth. And then I had to hold the papers in my hands and then in my mouth and crack those off. And was still doing the perch act with my dad. And then of course when I got pregnant, boy, that kind of put an end to the perch act. I still was able to do tight wire for a little while but I had to make my costumes different so they couldn't tell that I was pregnant. And it was shortly after that we went home to Max Creek, and then we got the job with Herb, and I was doing the wire act. My brother Johnny had just gotten out of the service, and so he went on the road with us, and he did the trampoline act, and his wife didn't do anything. She was a towner, and she couldn't seem to learn anything or care about it. So he just did the trampoline act. But there was another girl on the show who was an acrobat, and so she worked the trampoline with my brother Johnny. And that took care of us. So that's when we came here, and we bought, I guess we were with her for 2 or 3 years, and we bought a house over on North G Street. And it wasn't. I thought it was a castle, but it really wasn't much of a house. I mean, it was a home, and it had running water and stuff like that. And to me, it was a palace. But it had a living room and a bedroom in one corner, and then another bedroom and behind the living room. And so all the kids had to sleep in one room. So we got bunk beds, 2 and 3 high, for them to sleep in there. And my daughter Margie, she's the oldest girl. She is now an absolute neat freak. I mean, her house is immaculate all the time. And her kids were all raised up nice and clean and neat. And yet when she was a teenager, she was a slob. She'd take dirty clothes and stuff them back in her drawer. It's funny how kids change.
Well, tell us about your kids. Did they grow up in the circus?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And Margie was never any good on the trampoline. She could not master trampoline, but she did swinging ladder, and Susan did swinging ladder. Kathy did wire act, and she worked in another act on the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus when we were over there. And she assisted a man who did the spinning plate act. And she just was out there in a little costume and had to do his props and that all. But she did work on the tight wire. And so they've all been in the business. And David wasn't, I'm trying to think what he wasn't a wire walker. He was so soon, well, he went into the service. He was in the Marines. And so when he came back, instead of being a performer, he became a circus owner. And that was him. Corky was a juggler. But I don't know, after a while the kids kind of all went their own ways, and they didn't stay in the show business. The only one that did was Johnny. Johnny's the youngest one of my crew, and he lives over in Calera, just south of Durant. And he's on the internet, and if you wanted circus stories, he's the one you should go to. He has got a memory like can't believe. Names, times, and he'll give you the whole scoop. All you got to do is get him up on the internet. But he lives. My daughter Margie knows where he lives, and Margie lives in Calera, which is just south of Durant. But they were all in the business. The kids did their in the show. The kids did their comedy boxing act, but then they finally went to trampoline. Johnny was really good on the trampoline. And of course, my son David did trampoline too, and he was good. He could do a lot of backs, bang, 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 just real good at it. And gosh, I'm sure going on and on.
You're doing great.
Well, would you like to ask some questions?
So there's 8 children.
Yes.
Right.
There should have been 10, but I lost 2. The last 2.
Well, as you learned to do the aerial act, did you have a safety net or anything below?
No, I never. It never was that high. These were small shows, and you can't put a net underneath the carrying perch act anyhow. I mean, there's a man down there holding you up, and No, there wasn't anything that I did. Now, we had a flying act, and they had a net underneath them. Well, the flying act is different. The 3 trapezes, when they go from one to the other and flip over and grab hands and so forth. Well, that's called a trap act, a trapeze act, because trapeze and you can do a single traps, or you can do a trapeze, which is with the net underneath and all that. And we had those on the show, too. But there wasn't anything that we did that we needed nets under us.
How much did you practice? Or did you?
Well, once you learned it, you didn't practice because you practiced every day. You did 2 shows a day, 7 days a week.
Would you ever get injured?
Well, yeah, I got injured once when Harry and I, we got off the road for a while, and he worked for a company down in Texas, and we were just off the road because I was expecting, and he was trying to learn how to carry the perch. Well, I had worked for so many years, from the time I was 6 years old on up until the time I got married. Dad and I worked together, and we just automatically knew the right moves to make at the right moment. Well, Harry and I were trying to learn to do the perch act together. Well, it didn't work out very well at all. I took a fall, and I smashed this fit all to smithereens, and that was the end of us trying to do an aerial act together. From then on, we turned more into concessions, because with all my kids, talking about all my kids, I'm going to pull in another hooker on here. I went in to do the web act, and I had all the kids in the trailer, and I was in the process of changing Michael's diaper. He was just a baby then, and I didn't get the job done, and I had to leave and make my entrance. So I'm up here on the web, Spanish web, and who comes into the back door stark naked? Michael. Standing in the back door just as nude as the day he was born. All the crowd is laughing, and I can't figure out what they're laughing at. And then somebody, it was Julia, he came and grabbed Mike and took him back to the trailer. And I said, what were they laughing at? He says, your kid was in the doorway naked. But, there's a lot of little things like that come up. It's like with the broken bra one time. The snaps all gave away, and he had to go get me a pin. But I don't know.
Did you design your own costumes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I made all my own costumes, and of course that was a good thing, because whenever I get pregnant, I got pregnant on OOHRP show, and we went to him, and we've been 3 seasons with him, and this was our 4th season, and we were talking to him in the trailer, and Herb came over to visit us in the trailer and talk with us, and this is when we were in winter quarters, and he said, Harry was telling me, he said, we can't make a whole season, Herb. She's expecting a baby again. And he says, again? So I said, I can work up until the time I show. He said, well, I can handle that. He says, if you come on and make a season with me, we'll find something else for you to do. And so, but I had to design costumes now that hid the fact, because I worked, I guess, till I was about 5 months on. And I had to put my beginnings here and put tons of ruffles down here. So it didn't show. Yeah, I designed all my costumes, and I designed them for the kids as well. And
So a sewing machine was your friend?
oh yeah.
And was it hard to get fabric? Or since you
Not
traveled
in
so
those
much?
days, it wasn't. It wasn't hard at all. Because in the first place, there was a company in Chicago that handled all the materials required by show people, theatrical people, vaudeville people. And you could just write there and order something, and they'd send it out to you on the road or wherever you were at the time. And they had those elastic net hose that they weren't solid hose, but they were stretchy, elastic. They came later, but you got all your tights from them, and your pumps you got from them. And I never would buy their pumps. I always liked to get my own pumps. And they used to make a slipper that you could buy in any store. And I used to just buy those and wear them out on the wire until they were grooved and just use those. And they were little black slippers, and they fit with almost any costume. That man that just left when you all came in was repairman. My computer went on the blink.
Uh-oh.
I don't mean the computer, I mean my internet thing fouled up. Computer. I hope got it all straightened out for me. Because that's how I stay in touch with all my kids. I've got Margie and Chris and Kathy is a lawyer. I'm glad she became a lawyer because she always was when she was a kid. She lives in Norman, and she married a guy out of the business, but she got out of the business long before that because we sent her to college up there at that, my mind's gone blank again, that Catholic college, St. Gregory's, and she went to college there. And when she came out, she started selling advertising for some of the automakers around there. And then finally she decided she wanted to be a lawyer. And she spent a year or two studying and passed the grade and became a lawyer. So she's got her own law office now. And her husband is into, what would you title his work? He lays all kinds of lines and tubing and things like that underground for either electrical equipment or for drainage systems and things like that. He does quite well, and they're well to do. And she thinks everybody else is too sometimes.
Well, tell us about what you think are some of the more satisfying aspects of circus work. What satisfies you when it came to circus work?
Well, there's a lot of things. In the first place, most of the shows we were on were small. And if they weren't small, then you had a clique of small, and they were all friendly. And you just felt part of a small town. It was very homey. Everybody knew everybody else. And it was just like you lived in a little town that picked up and moved every day. And it was very cozy. And of course, if you came out with circus slang or something, somebody knew what you were talking about. If you're talking to a towner, well, then you've got to explain what you're talking about. And so,
Well, what are some examples of circus slang?
well, the flag's up. What does that mean to you? Dinner's ready in the cookhouse.
Okay.
All right. The eagle flew. Pay date. at the box office. And of course, you know the word towner.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about him, he's a towner. That's all that comes to mind right off, but there's a lot of them. I mean, the name of the accident, for instance, trampoline. Nobody really knows what a trampoline. They know the machinery of the trampoline, especially nowadays because they have them in school auditoriums and everything. But in the time that we were there, trampoline was a novelty. And if you said trampoline, they know what you. If you say swinging ladder, do they know what you're talking about? All they can see is a ladder swing. Perjack. That's a pole that you climb up and do tricks on. But if you just say perjack, they think you're talking about fishing. You got the loop-the-loop. Now this is one that I had a little trouble with too, because I used to do the loop-the-loop. Well, one time we had a new prop crew. Prop crew, that's another one. They're the people that take the props in and set them up and bring them out and so forth. Well, this time they did not level my swing. They didn't level it correctly. It was loose on one corner. And it's just got to be a little bit loose on one corner and your swing is whole out of whack. Because what you do, you get in there and you stand on that swing and you pump and you pump and pump until you go over and over and over. And then you stop and you go over and over and over this way. I could not get that swing over. I mean, it would not go over for me. And I worked so hard on it that it really damaged my health. I was off for quite a little while. And Harry said, I don't think you need to do the loop anymore. So I didn't for a while. But we taught Margie to do it. And she did the loop-the-loop. You got the bar you stand on has got a crack in it this way with a little round place where you stick your foot down in it and it fastens you onto the bar. You slide it over this way and it can't come out. So then you're pumping and you're upside down and sideways and everything else, but you're still hooked to the bar. And there's a lot of little things like that the crowd thinks, oh, she's cheating. Well, if you think I'm cheating, you get up here and try this too. I'll give you my shoes. You got to do it with style and grace. I mean, you can't just pump and go around. You got to, give it the jazz.
Was there anybody on the lot that kind of helped mentor like young girls on the show, or?
We had very few single girls on the show in the years that I was there. It just wouldn't have worked. There were too many working men there and so forth. Any young girls that were performers were with the family. So there wasn't a whole lot of that. You'd occasionally see one, but she's usually one that cozied up to the boss.
Well, on a typical day, like how early would you get started and what would you do? Just take us through a typical day.
A lot of depends on what show you were in. I'll tell you, on Herb's show, that's Cole Walters, he'd come around at 4:30 every morning and he'd bang on your trailer door, said, Harry, you're on the wrong lot. Then get up, throw the kids in the pajamas, put them in the back seat and take off to the next town. When you got to the next town, then the kids got dressed and you fixed some breakfast in the trailer, or you got ready, because they didn't serve a breakfast till about 11 o'clock on a show after the big top was up. That's when breakfast came. And that was just about it. After a while, you knew the time you had to get up anyway. It became a habit. You couldn't sleep after a certain hour. We had one year, 3 nuns traveled with the circus, and they had their own little compartment on wheels, and they used to go, Harry and I used to try to go to church every Sunday when we hit another town, but they would go ahead and they would locate the church so that they would tell us where it was. Well, I was supposed to be setting up my novelty stand. This is after I quit performing, and I used to give my my helper $10 to set up the novelty stand for me so we could go to church. And sisters would find out where the church was and let us know when we got in, so that we could, because we traveled a lot of times at night on Saturday. Most of the time it was really early in the morning, but for Saturday we travel at night a lot of times and get in that night, which made it a lot easier, because then we could stop at a cafe for a cup of coffee and ask them where the church was, and they could tell us. We didn't always make it, because a lot of times we couldn't find a church in the town. And the little sisters traveled with us for 3 years. Their order was Little Sisters of Jesus. They were just here this past winter. They came down to visit, and they're on the Carson and Barnes show now. They go out, and that is their mission, to be there, and I guess kind of like the former priests and so forth. They have a job that they do, and there's some kind of job on the show, either working a concession stand or mending costumes or something. Mostly people mend their own costumes. But they go on, and that's part of their mission. I don't know whether they were trying to make saints out of us or what.
Some semblance of a normal life, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Some semblance of a normal life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess. But they really loved the circus business. They loved the circus people because it was so a close-knit family. They really liked that. Like I say, they're on Carson and Barnes now.
Well, how would you know how to get to the next town?
You got a route slip. That was made for you in the office. And it's handed out to you. And also, they put up arrows. And when you leave the lot, there's a little cardboard like this that's got an arrow on it. And you just follow the arrows. That's another saying, too. Don't forget to follow the arrows. It was a little tough when you had to go through a city, too, because they were not doing that legally. They went either real late at night or real early in the morning, so they could avoid the law, and so you could see it. And then sometimes somebody would notice them and take them down, and then you're lost. Which way? Which way? Do I go right or left? Do I go straight ahead or what?
And no cell phones to call.
No cell phones. Well, what else?
When you were traveling like that, how would you do your laundry and things like that?
Well, that's another thing. The advance man, the man that laid out the lot before he goes ahead of the show the day before, and he lays out the lot. I mean, he's learned from a diagram where everything has to go, and he marks it out on the lot, so that when you come in, you know where you're supposed to go. Where's the backyard? Where's the front yard? Where does the water wagon sit? Where does the Donica sit? And so on. And he does that. And first thing you do, if you got a good advance man, he will. You give him a cup of coffee sometime in the morning when it's cold and rainy out and the cookhouse isn't open yet, or you just talk to him nice. Why, he'll locate the laundromat for you. So you head for the laundromat. I've spent a lot of Sundays in the laundromat. My girls used to gripe their head off because they went with me. Hey, it's your clothes too. Help. So.
Well, and you mentioned when it was payday, was it usually cash?
Oh, yeah.
Was it?
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't have to worry about a bank account or getting to
no.
a bank to cash it?
No, because that your income on a circus is referred to, your cost of running the circus is referred to as a nut. And you have to know what your nut is. And then when you do your show and you get the money from the concessions, from the pony ride, from the sideshow, from the candy pitch inside the big top, and then your ticket sales and so forth. And then you have the cash and you pay in cash. And then the rest of the money they'll ship to a bank. But they always carry a certain amount of money because they have to for anything emergency that comes up.
Well, as the performer, were you guaranteed a certain amount, or would it vary show to show?
Oh no, we'd get a flat rate salary.
I guess you'd have to save too to think about the time it was the off season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but of course when you've got a big family, you can't save very much, so you have to figure out something to do in the off season and to bring in a little money.
So what would you normally do in the off season?
Go find another show.
Oh, really?
Yeah. A picnic where they would like a little performance, or a nightclub, or a Lions Club or an Eagles Club or something. They often have big dinners for their members, and they'll hire an act or two to put on in their show. And that kind of, I can remember one time they had a low wire, and I think I'm trying to think whether it was a Lions Club or an Eagles Club. I can't remember. But there was a guy in the crowd who had a little too much to drink. And one part of my act is I come out in an evening gown and I waltz across the wire. And then I go out in the middle of the wire and take the night and evening gown off, and I'm in my costume for the day. And he started whistling and hollering and making bad kind of cracks and so forth. They finally had to oust him out of the club because he was lousing things up. And he said, what? And I heard some guy say, what's the matter with you, idiot? She's just a kid.
Well, it seems when you're talking about the advanced man, and even your interactions with your husband and your father, that communication is really important.
Well, yeah. Well, how? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I guess communication with people, you just couldn't be closed in. You'd have to, talk to others. Help me out, Tanya.
Working with the public, you have to be a people person, really.
Oh yeah. And if you're not, they run you off of the midway, because that's when you come in contact them. The backyard is supposed to be off limits for the towners because there's too many ways that they can get hurt, and then they want to sue you. And but that's one of the things that David said. I don't want to see a beer can on one of these trucks. I don't want to see a beer can on that midway. And I want you to treat the public is paying your salary. Treat them like you would if you were not going to get any salary. In other words, if it's just automatic, you treated the public very well. And no matter how, and some public can be awfully rude. But you smile and go along with it and pass by it, because you're going to be in Newtown next week anyway.
Well, you'd have to communicate with whoever your co-partner was in your act, too, wouldn't you? I mean, you have to be able to read their signs if something was going wrong and try to work around it, or...
Well, that only happened rarely. I mean, you didn't communicate much when you were working. If you did, you did it out of the side of your mouth. That brings to mind another, because I was doing my wire act, and I had a trick where I stand in the middle of the wire, and it went through a hook one time and bring it up over my body. And Harry was working my props, and we had an argument in the backyard. And when he got ready to give me the hook, he like that, kind of jammed it at me. And I got hot. I finished the act with a smile and went out in the backyard, and I said, if you ever do that in the ring again, I will kill you. I said, when you're in the ring, you are all smiles and nothing else. You don't show you're mad in the ring. And you didn't. I mean, you could have a couple on the show, the man and wife team, and they would be fighting like a couple of angry squirrels in the backyard. And then they would go through the front door, just nice and pretty, and smile and do that. And they come back out of the back door when the act is over. Right away. It happens.
Well, with birthdays and holidays, were there anything special with those?
No, not particularly. No, they weren't. Occasionally, if you had a real good boss or something, you might wish them a happy birthday or something like that. Or if you had quite a bit of family in the backyard, they would have a little private thing. I know one of the things I always liked so much about the Herb show is after the show at night, the people would gather. They'd take turns, the women, and serving a little lunch or some coffee or something like that in the backyard. And everybody would go to that trail. And then the next time there'd be another trail's turn to do it. And yeah, there was, when the show was over, and you couldn't stay too long because you had to get up and go to work the next morning. But if you had a 2-day stand, boy, that was a plus. You really got to sit up and have a sandwich and just chew the rag and, talk about old times and so on. It was fun. It was fun. It was real fun.
Well, with 8 children, how were they educated? Did they have a teacher on the lot, or how was that?
They have a teacher now. They didn't at the time my kids were small, and we just taught them best we could. And then, of course, when we moved into to Hugo, we put the kids in school here, and but the school worked with us so good because it is a circus town, and they understood. And that's when Mr. Parker was the superintendent of the school. Our kids would go to school there, but we'd take them out to go on the road, which was before school let out. But they would let me take the books with me, and I would have to school the kids at the dinette every day, and then all the lessons they did on paper, I would take down to the post office and mail back here to the school. And then they said, when you do that, now when you come back in, they'll get 2 weeks in their next grade. If they survive in the next grade, they'll stay. But if they can't do the work, then they'll have to go back. I said, well, that's fine with me. I'll make sure that they fail. They always made it to the next grade. So I used to have a little motorcycle, one of those little bitty motorcycles. And because you didn't want to unhook everything from the trailer when you got on the lot, and sometimes you were quite a ways out of town, I'd ride that motorcycle into town to send I had to mail them in every Tuesday. And I'd mail them in, and so they get to the school in time.
That's impressive.
You do what you got to do.
Sure, and keeping up with 8, that's a lot.
Well, I didn't have 8 all at one time. I mean, they did vary in age.
Right.
I didn't have quintuplets.
Well, would you do something for family fun when you weren't performing? Would you do anything in town ever, or?
No, you didn't mingle in town. About the only thing you ever did in town was go to the laundromat.
Okay.
And now the working men might spread out and go uptown, and that's when they got talked to behave themselves. And if they didn't behave themselves, they got fired, because you can't make anybody in town mad. I mean, somebody you talk to, you might be working for the mayor, and you insult them and make them mad, and then you got problems all the way around. So you just don't do that. If you do, you get fired, you're just kicked out.
Well, if you could be anything growing up, anything you want, say you did not have a circus career, what would you be?
I can't imagine anything else. I mean, because all these people, these show people and these shows that are on is like a huge family. And I don't always find that in town. There's always somebody that's gossipy, or somebody that's spiteful, or somebody that doesn't understand about show people, and they're a little nasty with you, like snubbing you and that sort of thing. Now, I really can't think anything that I would rather have done than what I did. I'm sorry, I hope I don't sound smug, but I really enjoyed my life. Even the bad times. And there were bad times. It's like the time that we were on Herb's show, and his daughter had a son, but she was divorced from the guy, and their son came to visit, and we had horse people on the show. They had the Liberty Act, and they also did the single horse act. And this boy got to use one of their horses. Well, when he was on that horse, why, he lassoed Bobby, my second son, and the horse took off, and it broke Bobby's neck. And he had to go down to a hospital in Dallas, and he was there for a long time. They had to rebuild the inside of his neck. That surgeon was, it was a new thing that they were trying. They'd never done it before, and they did it on Bobby and saved his throat. Now, he had a man-sized Adam's apple even when he was a little boy, because he said it can't grow. We've got to give him a full-size, what do you call that inside your throat there? Can't think of the technical name. But anyhow, he had that, and he still has a little bit of a hoarseness in his voice. But he was in the hospital down there for a long, long time, and I was off the show. Harry had to take care of the kids and work on the show while I stayed down there with Bobby. And it was a tough time, but the not the Lions Club, the Masons were so good to us. They had been sponsors for one of our shows, and when that happened, they were just so good. We had Bobby in a hospital first, and then we had to take him to a nursing facility, and then they're the ones that sent us down to Dallas to this doctor that was his specialty, his throat repair. And he went in there. It was the first operation like he'd ever done. He transplanted the torn up throat. What do you call that?
Esophagus?
Yeah. And thank you. He put in a man-size transplant in there. And for a long time, Bobby had a hard time in school when we came back here because he had a hoarse voice. And he had this huge
Esophagus,
yeah.
yeah.
And the kids used to call him hoarse, tease him, and so forth. And he was sweet on a little girl. This is in about the 4th or 5th grade. Sweet on a little girl, and he got her a box of candy. And she said, I don't want that. You're ugly. And really hurt Bob. Really hurt Bob. He and his wife have what do I want to think? It's like a yard sale, only he's got all kinds of buildings over there. It's called the Junction. It's on Highway 70, east of here. It's east of Durant, and they work that now when he got off the road, and because Mary was never on the road. His first wife, Maureen, was on the road with him, but their marriage didn't last. I don't know exactly what the problem was, but it didn't last. And Maureen and I are still great friends, and I email her all the time. But Mary's a good wife to Bobby, very good wife, but she just was never show people, and he just got out of the business. He's a sign painter and an artist, too. Trying to think. Well, Bobby did that elephant, and he did this, and I got so mad at him. Well, I won't say mad, but irritated, because that would have been the nicest kind of a Christmas card if he had just put the crib and Jesus down there where the clowns are all looking, and he never would do it. But
they're very good.
Well, you could live anywhere. You've probably been everywhere, seen everywhere. You could live everywhere. Why did you decide to make your home in Hugo?
Well, there have been several circuses that have wintered and been in Hugo. They used to have a grocery store here. It was well known all around the country, but it's before your time. There have been 45 circuses over the years that have wintered here in Hugo. And the thing about it was the people in Hugo were so accepting because, you know, the towners in the time when I was a young person, even at the time I got married, they thought that people that traveled with the show were gypsies and thieves. Didn't make any difference how it really was, but that's what they thought. The people here in Hugo accepted us for what we were. And they were good, they were understanding. You could get a loan at the bank, which you couldn't do anyplace else. And it was just an accepting town. And in those days, it was a lot different than it is now. We had nice businesses downtown. I hate Walmart. Walmart to me is like a huge vacuum cleaner that sucks up all the businesses downtown. Because you used the whole second street down there. You go in a store, well, hello, Mrs. Rawls, how are you doing today? How's the kids and so forth? You go in the bank, any of them, you know, everybody knew you. And they knew you were with the circus, and they still liked you anyway. So, you know, it was a great feeling. Why wouldn't we settle here? There's not as many circuses now as there used to be, but each one is better than 45 circuses. And, you know, if you want circus lore, I don't know how much time you've got or what you've done, but Dudley Hamilton, who lives across the street over there, he is a dyed-in-the-wool circus fan. And he can tell you almost anything you want to know about circus back to the year 1. Another one is Larry Moore. He lives up on 5th Street. I can't think of it. You'll find him in the phone book, I'm sure. But they make a whole history for themselves out of studying the circus. And they could give you a lot of things you want to know. They might dress it up a little bit more than I do, but still.
Do you think circus folk get a bad rap?
Well, I'll give you a little instance. When I first started going with Gerald, the farmer, he wanted us to go and visit his cousin in this town that we were showing. We were playing fair dates at that time. And so my mother and I went to his cousin's house. There was the mother, and there was an aunt, and there was a cousin, and Gerald came up there, and we were sitting there. We were a little uncomfortable with towners anyhow. We would never know how they're going to act. And Mama asked the older lady, says, "Can you tell me where the Catholic Church is?" And so she told me, said, and the younger girl, who was a cousin, I guess she looked about maybe your age, she says, "I didn't know circus people went to church." It made my mother furious. I mean, she couldn't get out of that house fast enough. I said, "Mama, they just don't understand." But that was the general idea. I mean, if you were not parked in a house, in a home, in a town, in one place, then you were vagabonds. And everybody thought that you were either a gypsy or a thief or a roustabout. Didn't make any difference. So that's one of the reasons that circus people became so clannish, because you couldn't mingle with them. Now that's different here. You say circus down here and say, "Well, hello, which one are you with?" You know, just nice people. So that's the reason we're in Hugo.
And where do carnivals fall into that?
Well, how can I put it without being rude? They were a class lower than circus, let me put it that way, because they had knockout joints on the midway. I'm talking about the carnival midway. And they weren't always fair. I mean, that ring that you were going to toss is a little bit smaller than the one he showed you when he tossed it, and that sort of thing. And then there's the 3-card monte kind of a deal, and they always had a hoochie coochie parlor.
They didn't travel with your group though.
Oh no,
would they?
No.
Well, you've seen many changes through the years with circus,
Mm-hmm.
Especially the smaller shows like Carson and Barnes and Kelly Miller.
Well, Carson Barnes is not exactly what I call a small show anymore. It's a pretty good sized show. Got a beautiful square top, and they have their performance is great. They've got a lot of great performers over there. But there are smaller shows. Now we've got Culpeper and Merriweather down here, and it's on the road already. And I don't know a lot about them now because I've been out of touch for so long. But that was a nice little show, and there was nice people on it, and they did a good show, but they had a raggedy big top. If it rained, you're out of luck.
Well, where do you see the circus business going in the next 10 to 20 years? Do you think people will still continue to go to circuses?
If circuses can survive on the road, I mean, you take just the cost of gasoline. You know how many semis there are on Carson and Barnes? Filling those up with $6 and $8 gas. It's, you know, it all depends. And of course, they just come back from California and they died out there. I shouldn't be saying that, but the business wasn't good out there. Let me put it that way. But I don't know. There are fewer and fewer of small shows anymore. But the big ones seem to be doing all right. It's not a question I could really give you an honest answer to because I really don't know.
Well, do you do a lot of crossover? Do a lot of the performers switch from circus to circus?
Oh, yeah.
Do they?
Yeah, you'll get, you'll hire an act for a season or two, but if you're playing the same route and doing the same act, you've either got to change your act, better it, or go off someplace else.
Would you have more than one chore during the day to do? I mean, if you're a performer, did you have other things that you had to do?
Oh, no, the departments were highly separated. Okay. You've got the working man, you've got the boss canvasman, he takes care of all the working men, seeing the thing get up, getting down. You've got the property crew, which is another one. You got a head prop man, and he's got his props, and he takes care of setting the rings up and getting the props ready for each particular performer as they come in. And then you've got the sideshow people, if the show still has a sideshow. Some shows don't have a sideshow anymore. And you've got a separate boss canvasman for the sideshow. And he makes sure that everything is set up and works that. And they're just different departments. And no, they don't really mingle much.
Well, when you decided that you weren't going to go on the high wire anymore, how did you come to that decision?
Well, I'm trying to think back. I guess that maybe we were not getting quite enough money. We went into concessions. And as I got older and didn't look as pretty in the ring, why, I started having the novelties. Well, Harry and I were going to stay home one year, and David wanted us to come out on the show. And I said, honey, I haven't done anything on the wire for a long time. He says, I don't want you to wear, I want you to take the novelty stand. I said, well, did you talk to Dad about it? And he says, well, I got something I want Dad to do, too. And I'm trying, what department was Dad in? Can't remember. Oh, I think Dad was the ringmaster. He was a ringmaster for a while. My son Bill, my youngest son, was a ringmaster also. Very good to it. He'd be a good actor if he'd just get in gear and do something like that. Right now he's an LP in a nursing home. But Dad and I were going to retire. And that's when we had finally sold the house on G Street that we had, the one that I thought was a castle. It really wasn't as much castle. And Harry was out on the road, and I had brought the kids home from school. And I saw this lovely, lovely big 2-story house on Lowry Street. And I went up to talk to him about it, and we were talking about it, and Dad was still out on the road. He was running concessions. That's a big deal on the Clyde Beatty show. And the money was good, and he had a lot of good butchers and so forth. And he got them under control so that they didn't misbehave. And so I came home with the kids, because I was running the pie car at that time, and put the kids in school, but we were living in our trailer out at the fairgrounds. That's the different fairgrounds from what it is now, but we were living at the fairgrounds. And I saw this house, and I asked the price of it and talked about it. And then I talked to Harry when he called on the phone. He used to call me every Sunday. And I was telling him all about the house. And he says, well, I don't want you to do anything until I see it. I said, well, I don't know how long they can hold it, honey, at this price. And he says, I'll be in there to see it. So the kids and I were all hoping and hoping, because at last the girls are going to have a room to themselves, the boys are going to have a room to themselves, we're going to have a bedroom to ourselves, we had a kitchen, we had a nice dining room, we had a big living room. And finally Harry came home, and we're all trailing behind him, walking up the steps to this house and on the front porch and so forth. And darn him, he wouldn't open his mouth, say nothing. We trotted him through all the rooms, and he didn't make a remark about anything, just nothing. And finally we were coming out the front door, and he said, Harry, say something. And he says, it'll do. So we got a loan at the bank and paid it off.
You said you were working the pie car?
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, that's it's usually in with the food stand on the midway, but it's where you get up in the morning, the cookhouse is not open yet, you want a cup of coffee, especially the working men, they'll come up there and they'll buy a piece of pie or some cookies, or get off of that paper, get off of that, Midge, come. No, she's just got to have attention. And so the pie car is there for that purpose. I mean, you can serve them. You have a big refrigerator, because I run the pie car, and the cook we had in there, he got rich real quick, and he blew the scene. He just took a powder in the night. And so we had nobody to put in there. So Harry, he was running the concessions. He said, well, you think you can handle it, Mary? I said, well, sure, I can handle it. I feed you, don't I? And so I took over the pie car. And, of course, I had to sell the hamburgers and the hot dogs and the Coca-Cola and all that to the public. But the pie car was considered where you go. A working man will come up in between hammering steaks or something and say, give me a glass of milk and a couple of those cookies. Or give me one of those pies you've got over there. Those pies that come in little packages. And or a cup of coffee. And the boss would always come over and want some coffee. And that's the reason they call it the pie car, because about all they served was pie and coffee. They call it the pie car.
And you mentioned the term butchers.
Yeah, that's the salesman in the big top that sell the popcorn and the cotton candy and the novelties and so forth. And you see them walking around the ring, pitching their product and so on.
Well, do you know how that name came about? Why butcher? It
originated on the early railroad trains. They made a movie about it. And there was guys that had a tray, and they had candies and things like that, and they would go up and down the aisleways of the train and sell people a snack or maybe a cigarette. Well, they weren't no cigarettes, but cigars or something like that. And they were called butchers. They wore a white jacket, and they wore a little white cap like that, and they were called butchers. Well, that just transferred itself to the circus, because all the people, I'll bet you don't know what a candy pitch is either, do you?
No. We're towners.
Well, they always have a candy pitch. They used to. They don't have it anymore. At least they don't have it on Carson and Barnes. But you got these boxes of candies. The Mrs. Miriam so-and-so made these best special honey-tasted candies and so forth. And in every box there is a prize. And one box out there has got a $10 bill in it. And then they start pitching the candy. You keep on, the guy at the microphone keeps on going, and the butchers go out there and they spread all this stuff, and you buy 2, maybe 3 boxes of the candy, and you might get a little whistle or something like that. Nobody ever got the $10 bill. But that's what they do. They was the candy butchers. And that fell over to anybody that was selling things, walking around the seats, And when you got a bunch of little kids in a circus, they get bored. I mean, no matter how good the show is, they'll eventually get bored. So they want something. So you've got your candy butcher, you've got your novelty butcher, and they go around and work the seats. And then if you don't sell anything, at least you're advertising your product, and they hit the novelty stand on the way. Just be quiet now, watch the show. Mom will get you something on the way out. That sort of thing. And then everybody on the midway is friendly, nice. There used to be some real rude people on the Midway, but David, for the 20 years he had his show out, he would have that speech in his big top before opening day. Everybody be up there on the bleachers. He would introduce everybody to everybody else. This is the prop man. This is the water man. He'll take care of your water. A little tip every week, a couple of dollars would help. And, everybody had a job. There's the electrician. He hooked you up to your trailer up to the electricity. Well, he gives this speech, and then he says, now, you should be able to tip the water man and the electric man a little bit. It doesn't have to be much, but give them something. And when the people are on the Midway, I don't want to see anybody insulted. I don't want to see anybody pushed around. And you working men, I don't want any beer cans in those cabs, and I don't want them on the Midway. Now, if you want your beer, you have it after the show at night, and you'd be sober in the daytime. And he ran his show like that, and for 20 years. And he after the first year, he never had a losing day. And he always had people who were happy to be on his show. And I remember before the color issue was delineated as it is now, we had a couple on the show. She was a tiny, petite, blonde girl, and she was married to a black man. And he was just the nicest guy, but he always approached everybody hesitant because he never knew what kind of a reception he was going to get. Well, he was accepted there, but it was so funny. I'll never forget. We were all standing in the line at the pay office waiting for our paycheck, and it was Easter Sunday. David never showed on Easter Sunday, and Midge, not now, and Bill was standing behind his wife there, and everybody was saying, "Well, what'd you get your wife for Easter?" and so forth and so forth. And Harry asked Bill what he could get to his wife for Easter, and he started hopping up and down. He says, "A chocolate bunny." It just knocked everybody cold out there. He got really accepted because, he came on in severe trepidation because a mixed marriage like that was rather new at that time. But they were such a neat couple, and they were really fond of each other. So you couldn't discuss. He was a gentleman too.
Well, before we got started, you were telling me about the flying. What was it?
The fly.
The fly. The human fly.
The human fly.
Is that what it is? Who was the human fly?
My father.
Your father. And how did he get that name?
Well, because he could crawl up these buildings. I mean, these big brick buildings. Of course, it was easier those days than it is now because you know how the bricks are put on buildings. They're like that. And he would climb all the way up to the top. And if you read that story, the windows all opened in those big buildings in those days, not like it is now. You can't open a window in a tall building. And the women would be sticking their head out and watching him climb up the building. And he wasn't a bad-looking guy. He was tall and skinny. And he said, "Now I'm going to kiss every pretty girl I see on the way up." And, of course, the women all got their heads out there looking, see But he'd climb all the way up to the top. And he would usually have an advertising gimmick. He would be advertising the Chevrolet company or the Ford company or something like that. That's how he got paid. And the streets below would be packed full of people. And I think you'll see some pictures of that in there. And then when he got up to the top, he'd hang by his knees and hold a sign up that advertised the business that he was hired for to do that. And he made his living that way during the Depression.
And his name was?
Jack Williams.
That's his stage name. What was his?
Real name, Frazier.
Jack. Or is it still Jack?
Yeah.
And your mother's name was?
Lucille.
And her maiden name?
What was her name? I can't remember because my mother was raised in an orphanage.
Oh, okay.
Her mother died when she and her brother were young, and they were put in an orphanage, but they were put in separate orphanages. The boy went to one, and she went to another. And when she was 16, they had trained her to be a nanny. And so she worked as a nanny for a while, and then finally she got a job in the telephone company, and that's where she was when Dad met her.
And did your husband have a stage name?
No, he was always Gabe Rawls in the business, but as he got older, he became Harry. A little bit more sedate.
And did you just choose Harry, or is that like his middle name?
No, that's his real name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he went to school, a Catholic school in Arkansas. All right, what's the name of that town in Arkansas? There, and it's a big town. I can't remember the name of the town, but there's a school there for boys. And there were a lot of boys there. Some of them were boys that were misbehaving, and some were boys that their parents sent them there to be, because it was all Catholic brothers. And Harry was very popular there because when my daughter Margie got married, 5 of those brothers come all the way up here to attend Margie's wedding. And I thought that was the coolest thing. They just made that trip all the way up here for the wedding.
It's a very close-knit family, isn't it?
And all 3 of my girls were married in that. There's a little church downtown across the street from the big Methodist church, and that was always our church. Now we moved out to this other place on the highway. But all 3 of my girls were married in that church. Margie and Susan and Kathy. Isn't that awful to get old?
Do you have what would be your favorite part of being in the circus? Or a favorite memory?
Well, I'll have to be truthful with you. I love the applause. I love the entertainment and getting down and taking my bow and hearing the applause. And I loved it, every minute of it. Then I go back in the backyard and wash the diapers out in the bathtub. No kidding, I washed them out in the bathtub.
A lot of contrast.
Yeah.
Well, when you were doing novelty, did someone show you those ropes? I mean, you had to place orders and decide on what to order and all that?
They had the concession department ordered for you. If you were short on something, you tell him that you needed it. And remember what's that little yellow bird that used to be in the cartoons?
Oh, like Tweety Bird?
Yeah, he was real popular. And I kept running out of those. And we had elephants, and we had tigers, and we had monkeys, and so forth. And for a long time, we had those little furry monkeys on a cane.
Mm-hmm.
I sold a lot of those, but they quit making those, so I couldn't get them anymore. And the modern day concession items are not as inviting or as intriguing as what they used to be. But I went into that business, and I did the novelty business like I would do a performance. Because, here's people. They want to buy things. Hi, how are you? What can I do for you? What about this one? Do you like the Tweety Bird? Would you like a little elephant like that? I've got anything you want. What would you like? This one's $2. That one's $1.50. I'm putting on the charm on front of the novelty stand.
And what would you do when you didn't have customers? Did you do anything in particular?
Yeah. I went home and made the beds and cleaned up the kids and
No, but when you were doing the novelty stand, when there was a slow part into the business, did you crochet or?
Oh yeah.
Or
well, I did a little of that. I made a half a dozen rugs like that one down there, and I made a half a dozen Afghans like that one over there, and that over there, and I've got so many of them put away. I did an awful lot. I did a beautiful picture of an Indian chief. It was embroidery. Took me a whole year to finish it, and I had it up in the house. But the church was having a sale out here at the fairgrounds, and everybody was supposed to donate something for them to sell. You buy a coupon, and then when they had a drawing made, well, you got whatever it was that you chose. You'd have a whole counter full of things that people donated. and I donated that Indian chief. It was a picture about the size of that one over there, with a real nice frame on it.
Always busy then. No downtime.
Not for mamas.
Well, do you have any advice for people who are looking to get into the circus business, maybe as a performer?
I don't really know. I couldn't say for sure because if you're a newcomer, my area has kind of dried up and gone away, and it's not like it used to be. But if you've got something that you can do and you can do well, you just go apply for a job. If you can't get it on one show, try another show, and so forth and so on. A lot will depend on your personality and whether or not they can depend on you, because if you hire an act for a show, you've got to have it for the whole season. And that I really couldn't give you good advice for now, because I've been out of the business too long. I mean, we were 14 years out there at Southern State. And Harry insisted on retiring. Why, I don't know. I was bored out of my gourd. But all I did was make beds and cook him his meals. But it seems to be different. I just haven't been in contact with them, and it's hard for me to do that. Now, the Kelly Miller Circus, which is under different ownership now, David sold the show to John Ring in the North, and they opened. They didn't open here, but they showed here at the fairgrounds, and I debated about going out there and out, but it's hard for me. And I finally decided not to go, because that was my world, and my world is gone for me, and there's no sense moping on it or going out there and feeling like an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't go. I wish I had, though, because one of the guys out there, they told me later, was one of the butchers I used to have when I had the concession stand. Mike Rice was his name.
Well, you'll always have your memories.
Yeah, I have the memories. And the show is, the Kelly Miller show is still pretty much the same as it was, a little bit more glossy. And this guy that, well, we won't go into that. Everybody said it was a good show, and I'm sure that it is. It's just that I have drug my feet when it comes into the modern circus world.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Well, is there anything else you'd like to tell us today that we haven't?
I'm 83 years old.
And you're looking great.
Well, that was a good question too. How have you managed to stay in such good health and shape?
Well, now I can't say I was all that good in shape, because I did have open heart surgery, but evidently I had it for a long time and didn't know it, because every once in a while I'd have a little fuzzy spell or a fainting spell or something, and I just put it off to, well, I'm too tired, I've got to rest a while or something. And come to find out, I had an outlet valve on my heart that wasn't working right. It didn't pump out. So they took me down to the hospital. I went down to the doctor's office for a cold pill and had a fainting spell there. So they shipped me off to Dallas, and I had the heart surgery, and I am highly susceptible to any kind of what's the word I want, medicine that puts you out, sedative. And so I was groggy for a long time. And they came in and they told me that they had replaced the valve and it was doing all right. And I'm okay. And they said, David was with me, and he said, "What they use a pig's ear to replace a faulty valve." And I looked up at the doctor and said, "Oink." And I went right back to sleep again. But after I came home from the hospital, it was a month or two. I was still, fuzzy-minded, and half of my memory, as you've already discovered, has disappeared from me. And And a year ago, I'd probably been able to bing out all this stuff and no problem.
I
But
don't know. You
it's
did pretty good today.
gone.
Well, we really appreciate you talking with us about the circus and giving us a look into your world.
Well, you have just given me a great day too. I gone back in memory lane. It was really nice.